Hello and welcome to the Choralosophy Podcast, a weekly podcast whose mission is multifaceted. Each week when you tune in, you will find episodes that question best practices, challenge music education dogma, facilitate conversations about touchy topics, demonstrate pedagogies, and conversations where colleagues learn from each other. This is episode 296, How to Make a Musician with Allison Wilkinson. Humans are a musical species, all humans, but many move through their music education without realizing it. We are putting the most vulnerable part of the brain in the hands of overworked people. This is a systemic problem. Emotionally intelligent music instruction can be part of the solution. This week's guest dropped something on TikTok that completely shifted how I view rehearsals. When we make music, we are operating in the exact same part of our brain that recognizes our deepest vulnerabilities. Specifically, we are cross-wired with the part of us that notices our own nakedness and vulnerability. It's intense, it's raw, and it explains why singing can feel downright terrifying sometimes for our students. Joining me is the brilliant Allison Wilkinson to talk about why music is the ultimate bravery workout, as well as the most AI-proof subject in schools today. We discuss how navigating that musical discomfort builds literal neural pathways for resilience that serve kids in the boardroom and beyond. Whether you're a teacher balancing hundreds of students a week or a parent wanting the best for your child's cognitive health, you don't want to miss this one. Let's jump into the conversation. And of course, if this discussion sparks questions for you or your own thoughts, you can head over to the Choralosophy Substack and join a conversation thread there, or you can head over to the Facebook page Choralosophers, which is private and set aside for discussions just about episodes on the show. You can bring up episodes you listened to years ago, or this one, it's really up to you, so head over and join us at either of those online locations. Your music program or event deserves a platform that does it all, without the extra costs. With Ludus, you get seamless ticketing, built-in marketing, powerful fundraising, and volunteer management, where volunteers can sign up, schedule shifts, and track hours with ease. Need to sell merchandise and concessions in person? Ludus Retail lets you log sales by each group, track inventory, keep everything organized. Hosting music lessons or theater camps? They have a classes feature, which makes registration and student tracking effortless. And it's free for your organization. Thousands of programs already trust Ludus because they help you focus on what matters most, the performance. If you've been dreaming about taking your student group on a trip, your choir, but you want it to be more than just a bus ride and a performance, you should check out Kaleidoscope Adventures. They've been planning exceptional student travel for more than 30 years, and they specialize in creating experiences that are both musically meaningful and logistically smooth. From performance opportunities to workshops and clinics, the Kaleidoscope Adventures team handles the details from start to finish so you can focus on your singers. If you're ready to plan a trip that truly fits your choir, visit mykatrip.com or click the link in the show notes. A big shout out goes to the producers and Inner Circle over at the Patreon page. These are folks that are really dedicated to keeping the lights on here at this show. Venture Studios, Chandler Smith, Brian Long, Michael Herron, Kyle Peterson, Steve and Kathy Kakachik, David Kowalczyk, Max Jackson, Angie Schilling, Rebecca Chalk, RJ McCracken, Michael Shimp, and Kyle Siddons. Everybody, I am here with Allison Wilkinson. Allison is a music educator, an author, and a communicator online, very much like I am, trying to communicate important things about music education to the world. And I came across her on social media recently and found some of the content and some of the points being raised to be very interesting and thought-provoking. And so, of course, the beauty of a podcast is we get to take some of those ideas expressed in our little 60-second videos online and dig into them a little bit deeper. So, Allison, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here.
So why don't you start by just telling us and the audience a little bit more about who you are, kind of what you do and why you do it and how you got to that point.
Yeah, well, I think of myself first and foremost as a music teacher. I have been teaching for 20 plus years, but I didn't actually come to teaching music the typical way. I was in an ethnomusicology program and had to leave college early because of a family tragedy. And so when I got back, I had this ethno stuff that I knew and was studying, and then started teaching at a Montessori school. And so it's just very untypical way of these things sort of happening. I didn't have any education, any pedagogical education at all. And then I got thrown into this incredibly different pedagogical framework, which is Montessori, which is see what the child does. So I came from ethnomusicology, which is why do people do music? And then went into Montessori, which is how do people learn? And they said, hey, do you want to teach music? And I just made it up for a long time. But at the same time as that was happening, Montessori is a really good environment for kids with ADHD, kids with autism, kids with trauma. So I was needing to get a ton of resources on how music works in the brain to help those kids, and ended up getting really into music psychology, not music therapy so much, but music psychology that I could use in my classroom. And that's kind of how we got to today. I was talking to a friend of mine in 2020, and we were going over all these things, and she just happens to have her master's degree in music education. And she said, what are you talking about with the brain? I didn't know this. And I was just writing her emails back and forth. And that set of emails became a book. And that book became a life that I'm living now. So, yeah.
That's really cool. And I want to get to some of those ideas for sure. One of the things that I am also very passionate about is communicating to people how important music instruction is and can be when properly delivered. And I think actually I remember seeing something about that you mentioned about that on your channel as well, about how just because it's music instruction doesn't mean it's helping the kid's brain. There are certain things that have to be present. I'm not sure if you're familiar with an organization called Bigger Better Brains out of Australia that is kind of an advocate in this area too. Anita has been on the show, and one of the things she talked about was how the instruction has to be kind of having a triangle of things. You've got to be engaging the eye, the ear, and the body, the kinesthetic. All of those things have to be happening at the same time in order for it to qualify in this way. And so when you were putting together your kind of, your book and some of your philosophies related to music education, how would you say that you encountered this brain stuff? Was it because you had to go do the research for the book, or was it just stuff you were encountering anyway, and then it led to this email chain and then the book? So I don't know if that question makes sense. Or did you accidentally find it, or did you have to go looking?
So I had to go looking for it, but I wasn't doing it for the book. I was doing it for my students. So my students would ask me things like, I'd say, okay, well, we need to practice. And they'd be like, I don't know what that means, because I was dealing with autistic kids who would just tell me. They weren't
right.
filtering themselves. And I was like, oh, how do you practice? And then I had more questions for myself that I kind of worked out with my students, which was, how do you practice, and how do you make it so it doesn't suck? And how do you, so that you're practicing with joy? Is it more effective for the brain to practice with joy? Or is it more effective for the brain to practice from a pressure or a fear point of view? And I went and looked for, okay, what does the research say? What are we seeing? Dr. Collins was a huge deal with that, actually, Anita, that you're talking about. Huge deal with that. But it was always just to help the kid right in front of me. What do you do when you have a kid in trauma? What does music look like then? And that's really where the discovery about music living in this place in your brain where you are nude, essentially mentally denuded, like at that deep, vulnerable place. That's why sometimes music teachers will feel like therapists, because I would have a kid in front of me with trauma and none of their other teachers would know, but I would know, because I was touching the part of their brain where that pain was existing. And so I needed to research, like, what do you do? Right.
Yeah, that's a really good point. My wife, Beth, is a private voice teacher, and she frequently reflects back on the time during the pandemic when a lot of things were closed, and her private students, either through a Zoom meeting or through when she was doing things in person, students would frequently come into her studio to their voice lesson and just cry for 30 minutes. And they would say things like, this is the only time all week that I'm seeing another adult, or this is like I'm going on psych meds for the first time, and they're telling her where they're not telling other people, those types of things. And then we started reflecting during that time of like, okay, so where is the line between therapy and music instruction? Because we see it so much. There have been times as a classroom music teacher where when some traumatic things have happened in my building or in the student population, I'm the teacher that they track down to talk about it. And that's great. But at the same time, I'm not trained for that. And it has its own mental toll on me as well. Are those some of the same type of things that you've encountered? And if so, does that sound crazy?
No, it's not crazy. Actually, that completely tracks with, I think, first of all, what most people experience if they are even a little bit empathetic, loving, caring. and they teach music, that feeling like a therapist thing is pretty universal. Music is processed, and then it is also made in the part of our brain where our deepest instincts live. It's why I do this sometimes in conferences, when I'm speaking in conferences. I will demonstrate this by having a completely normal tone of voice, kind of looking away, trying to get the people in the audience sort of calm down. And then I will just scream and watch the whole room sort of levitate, like, like they all instantly react. And my next question is, did any of you think to yourselves before you all jumped up and were frightened, well, goodness, I wonder what the matter is? So I made a musical sound that could instantly trigger the survival part of your brain. It was an expressive sound. It wasn't language. It wasn't anything visual. It was a sound. And when you hear a sound, it will turn on that emotional center of your brain non-optionally. It's not as though you can parse out and intellectualize how sounds make you feel. They just make you feel. You don't have an option. And singing in particular is particularly intense because you are the instrument. It's inside of you. And even just from a vibration point of view, there's some really interesting things that go on with the voice, because if your emotions are not free, your body's not free. And if your body's not free, the singing isn't free. So it's pretty intense for any instrument player. But the instrument of the voice, it's orders of magnitude more intense.
Yeah. One of the observations that I've made over years of doing this, could maybe explain what you just said in a slightly different way, is that when we sing, that expression is more intimately connected to the same way that we verbalize language and we verbalize our emotions. It's got the same mechanism built in, whereas when I play the piano or when I play my clarinet or whatever it is, there is a disconnect there that happens where we're not using the same part of the brain in the same way that we are when we sing. We're operating the same. Even if you look at it on an MRI, we're even seeing the same parts of the brain light up when we read music versus when we read other languages, and when we speak and when we recall and when we sing back and sing and call and response. It's a conversation in a very intimate way that cannot be separated from who we are. And I like how you said you don't think about how it makes you feel, that you just feel like it's not an option. And I think sometimes students in particular, when they're encountering these things for the first time in a music class, I think that's where it can become overwhelming, because it's almost like they've lost control and they don't know how to conceptualize that loss of control. Thoughts?
Well, this is where music teachers have a big responsibility. And it's interesting because up till very recently, there's been very little training for this in music education settings. Like what do you do? A math teacher can say, hey, whatever's going on with you, can you leave that at the door? Come in, we're going to do some math. But I remember one time, it's very distinct memory of a band director telling me, hey, I need you to leave all those emotions you're having at the door. Like he said this to the whole group. I need you to leave all those emotions you're having at the door so that we can just work on the music. And I pretty much later on in research was like, he was asking for the impossible. When you walk into a music classroom, there is no way for you to disengage from your emotions, because music is expressed emotion. Whatever you are feeling in the moment is going to come out of that instrument, whatever it is, and double so for voice.
I've had that same feeling as an ensemble music director. I've had that impulse to tell kids that we've got to leave the emotions of the day out, because we have work to do, and that is a real thing in ensembles. Like, we have to get the work done, and there's a concert on a certain date, and we can't. But I don't think leaving the emotions outside are really what we want from the kids. I think sometimes we might ask them to leave certain petty dramas outside. Oh, yeah. Maybe we don't need to bring in our current drama with our boyfriend right now to this class and talk about it and all that kind of stuff. But there's an emotion burning underneath that issue that is very valid, and we actually need it for the music making. And I think that's a crucial distinction. Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. There's so much. Emotions are energy, and who doesn't want energy in their music? Right. And that skill of connecting emotions to expression is something that is getting more and more valuable in an AI world. And AI can think. They cannot attach emotions to thoughts. They cannot attach emotions to anything. They don't have them. We have emotions. Yeah. So that makes music class that much more valuable.
Yeah, one of my little buzzwords or catchphrases over the last year, really, with my students at school, has been to remind them that this is the most AI class in the building, AI-proof class. Sorry, in the building. It's you can't cheat in here with that. Like there's just nothing that you could do through an AI that's going to help you in this class, and that's a good thing for you. And the interesting part about making that argument to teenagers is that most of them, almost everyone I've had that conversation with, has been like happy about that. The kids I think kids are actually more afraid of this tool than than we realize. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, so the adults are worried about it in their own way, but I think the kids deep down, they know that how tempting it is to just not have to think anymore. And I think intuitively they know that that's not good for them. And so when I've tried to connect what you just said, really, I've tried to make that point to probably 100 teenagers over the last year. And they look at me with this like doe-eyed expression of like, yeah, yes, it is. I am completely disconnected from the internet when I'm in this class. And they are hungry for it. And we have to figure out ways to get more of them to be able to do it. I think that's the advocacy.
Oh yeah. I'm getting to work with Music for All on something pretty much exactly like that. My particular work, because I run a foundation called the I Am Music Foundation, and we do teacher trainings and all sorts of things, but we are working on music deserts, areas of the country where there is just zero music education happening. Okay. And I live in Oregon, and the West Coast is particularly bad. California is doing a little bit better now that they put $1.2 billion into arts education this last year. But yeah, there's whole areas of my state where there is zero music education happening. And then there's other places where it's just not, it's basically not happening. You have kids who are, the music teacher is dealing with 1,200 kids a week. How do you meaningfully create a music learning experience if you are having to service 1,200 kids a week? It's impossible.
No, and of course that's an extreme version of what we deal with here. But even our middle school vocal music teachers in the district I teach in see somewhere in the neighborhood of 650, 700 kids all by themselves with no assistance, and it's just wild. And then they're of course expected to prepare kids for music at the next level, but also make sure they feel welcome and make sure that they're feeling connected and social and emotional. It's ridiculous. And of course, so that's part of that advocacy. But if there are places where, in fact, I think I might remember seeing something that you posted about near where you live, there was like a situation where a Board of Education voted away elementary schools, something. What was that all about?
The district that I live in, and it was shocking to me. They cut every single elementary music position, every single one. There were, and I'm not in a small district. That was 9.5 positions. They just cut them. So there is now no music happening in any of the elementary schools. And they're really looking over the financials of it. Like when we were going to those board meetings, it was sort of like, I can see how you got here, but I don't see why this was the thing that you did. And I went and I told him that. I was like, you just said in this meeting that what you want as a district is better community and more emotionally regulated kids. And then you cut music. But music is the thing that actually creates community in the brain. When I sing with you and when you sing with me, the bonding centers of our brain light up. So you're cutting community out at its knees, and you want more emotional regulation, but there is no more efficient emotional regulation tool than music. I was like, right. You are. How did I can't remember who said it, but I read it in C.S. Lewis where he said you're castrating and then bidding the gelding be fruitful. Like you are not providing for the thing that you are needing. It's wild.
Right. If you haven't already, I really think it's time for you to ditch the bulky sight reading books, the paper, all of the things that are already in the kids' folders in your classroom because it's not customizable to what they need in the moment. Sight Reading Factory allows this and so much more, including auto-assessment for at-home assignments, no more grading them individually. They can be graded in the moment. I've been giving kids assignments where they have to reach 90% or above on the auto assessment at a level that has been determined as appropriate for them, or turn in your 6th attempt. These are 10-minute assignments, and we're getting more and more kids doing them every time. Then the work we do in the classroom can be customized to what they need in the music and the repertoire they're learning, and it can be customized to their current learning level as a group. Not all 9th graders are the same, not all 8th graders are the same, etc. Sight Reading Factory is the future and it is the present. So use the Coralosophy checkout code, Coralosophy. When you check out, it'll give you a 10% discount every time you get a membership for yourself and for all of your students, which is really, really important so they can do this at home. Yeah, well, I've observed for years that the most efficient way to deliver, just to throw the acronyms out there, the most efficient way to deliver DEI initiatives and SEL initiatives would be to get everybody into ensemble music classes and music classes in general, and use that vehicle that is naturally building those senses of community that we're trying to do through those types of initiatives. And when music teachers have to fight their own administrations on that kind of thing, it can be really frustrating, for sure. And I have heard, there have been lots of conversations that I've had over the years with educators through this platform regarding these types of areas where, for example, no elementary school music education is happening at all. In my context as a choir teacher, it's places where kids are not getting the chance to sing together in any kind of an organized fashion until they get to middle school or high school. And that creates lots of inequities within the vocal music landscape of things, because we get, places where kids are singing in choirs from grade 4 all the way up to high school, and of course they are able to advance quickly. And then you get some kids with their first ever choir that meets every day is 9th grade or something like that. And so there are huge gaps in how we deliver music education around the country, for sure. But I also wonder, too, if some of the advocacy that you do related to music and the brain and how it benefits kids in their cognitive development, some music educators will actually, I've noticed, will actually say, well, why are we talking about that? We should just be talking about how music is valuable for music's sake. But my problem with that, I mean, I'm sure you've come across that argument, but my beef with it is that the people who are making these budget cuts, they don't give a shit about the musical artistic value and inherent flu-foo stuff. They don't care. They do care, though, about educational numbers and test scores and cognitive things and nerdy brain things. That is the advocacy that we should be taking to school boards, to politicians, to those, like, hey, this will make the kids smarter. And of course, yes, music is valuable for music's sake, but we don't have to pick one or the other. I think we have to choose our audience and advocate in the language that they will understand. I just dumped a lot of, that was a soapbox for you, but what do you think about that?
I think you are right, and I actually would push back. The music for music's sake, I've heard that argument a few times, and I think it makes a ton of sense for the audience of music teachers. I think if you're a music teacher and you hear music is important because it's music, you know all of the context and you know exactly what that means. And so it really hits when you're talking to a music teacher. However, if you're talking to an administrator, if you're talking to parents, if you're talking to students, they don't have that context.
Right.
So you are giving them this grand philosophy that doesn't hit, it doesn't communicate. And actually, there's another piece to this. You mentioned how administrators, they like to see the brain stuff. They like to see the test scores. That's absolutely true. But I have a theory that a lot of administrators have music trauma. And I'll tell you what that means. So when music is taught in a really healthy way, it sounds like you and your wife have got this on lock. And the way you can tell is if your room is the safe place, you're doing emotionally intelligent music instruction. But there is an opposite to that. There is a flip side to that, where where music teachers are not teaching in an emotionally intelligent way. They're overusing competition. They are, especially between students, they are, there's an in crowd and an out crowd, and they aren't looking for how to build up the person in front of them. They're looking for how to build their program, and that they will build that program at the expense of whoever needs to get weeded out.
Uh-huh.
And I can't tell you how many school administrators, superintendents, state superintendents, just people on boards, who I say, tell me about your musical story. And they'll go, well, I wasn't very musical when I was a kid. And then I will ask, who told you that? because there is no 3-year-old walking around going, I'm not good at music. Every 3-year-old I know is like, huh? Right? Like they don't care. But at some point you get told, no, not you. And every time I ask an administrator, who told you weren't good at music? They have a story. Some choir teacher said, hey, you really shouldn't be singing in this. You should join something else. And that is a message. Getting back to music lives in the same place you are naked. Could you imagine if you were on your honeymoon and you were getting ready to be intimate and your new spouse looked at you and went, I don't know. Did you work on this? Like it's something you never forget. Practicing? Yeah. Have you been practicing this and be like, well, this other person did it way better. Like it is not something that people realize is trauma, but it is trauma because those people don't make music for the rest of their lives. And so I think on a very subconscious level, we have an epidemic of administrators who don't feel bad that they're cutting music because even though cognitively they see that there are benefits, deep down, I think they are saving their students from trauma.
That's an interesting take, and I buy it by and large. I think that let me expand it a little bit. Because even if the administrator in question doesn't have some deep-seated music trauma from their childhood, they probably have music indifference, meaning that the music instruction didn't make any impact on them. And so when they think about whether or not it's going to impact students by and large, they don't have a story to tell that's positive. Yeah. They might not have a story that's negative either. They just don't have, they're just like, music was just like kind of a worthless 30 minutes every, twice a week that we did in elementary school. And I never really did it after that. And I was fine. I turned out fine. And so musical indifference, I would add those two categories together. And then I think you're dealing with almost every music teacher, almost every administrator that is making those types of decisions. Although I want to go back to the music trauma thing from traumatic types of experiences that might not register with kids, because of course as a choir teacher I hear that kind of stuff all the time when I go out into the community and just to random people when they ask what I do for a living. It's like it's a meme with us choir teachers where somebody will say, oh, I can't sing. And I do the same thing that you do, which is to say, who told you that? Like, why do you think that? Or I'll make some joke about, well, you just never had my class because you would think that you could sing if you had my class, because I would teach you how. And everybody can learn how to sing. And, that's kind of the attitude that I'll bring to them. But usually I get some kind of story about an elementary school. It's almost always elementary school teacher, and that put their hand in their face at some point and said, shh, or less of your voice, or you can't, creating some impression that your voice is actually making it worse. Now, here's my take on this, and I want to see how you feel about it. I think that can sometimes come across, especially when I've told that story in the past on the podcast, that I'm blaming elementary school music teachers for this societal problem. And I always want to make very, very clear that that's not what I'm actually criticizing. What I'm criticizing is a system and an environment where that elementary school teacher has to teach 700 kids twice a week for 30 minutes, and then also put on a program in a certain amount of time where they have to sound good, or else the administrators don't think they're good at their job. And so there is this perverse incentive for them to take the kid who maybe doesn't match pitch very well yet and just put the hand in the face. Because it would take me a whole lot longer than 30 minutes twice a week to teach that kid how to internalize, audiate pitch and rhythm, recreate it with their vocal mechanism in a way that is beautiful and succinct and accurate. And I don't have that kind of time because they've only given me that 2 30-minute sessions with 45 kids all at once. And the only thing I can do to make the program not suck in November is to shh that kid. Yeah. And that creates all this mythology that permeates through our entire society about certain people who believe that they can't sing because they encountered music in that environment and not in one that is rational. Thoughts?
I have a lot of empathy for those elementary music teachers. I have a bunch of them going through my training right now, and this is the thing that breaks their heart the most, is that they see that somebody really wants to engage with music and that they need a little bit more support, and they can't do it. And it's sort of like, to be honest, the analogy I have is if you're one doctor on a ward who's trying to take care of all the patients, some of them are just going to stay sick because you don't have time to treat them all. And that's what we're doing in music education. We are putting the most vulnerable part of the brain in the hands of an overworked person. And that is a problem. That by itself should be enough advocacy. What you need more than one person. Actually, in districts just north of me, I'm in Portland, Oregon, and in Vancouver, Washington, every music classroom in middle school and high school, they double up. So there are 2 band directors in every class. There's 2 choir directors in every class, 2 orchestra directors. So that significantly makes that job easier. And that's probably how it should be, especially because those classes are massive. What are you going to do? Yeah.
That's similar to my environment. My biggest choir is 88 kids, and we meet for 44 minutes every day. So we have two directors, and so that saves the day because we can separate out into 2 different groups and work on different or multiple groups and supervise them in that kind of smaller group instruction. We can combine back together. It's really ideal. But even in my district, where the middle school teachers teach 3 times as many kids as I do, they don't get any help. And the elementary school teachers definitely don't get any help. They're just, sprinkled around like salt on a gigantic plate of food. You can't season anything with that. And so, it's a big problem. And actually, I'm glad you mentioned again the emotional vulnerability part of this, because I'd like to go back and play a video from your TikTok. That is awesome. And so thank you for that video. And I want to dig into it a little bit. The reason that one is one of the ones I wanted to highlight with you in this conversation is because everything you just said in that video is kind of it almost mimics word for word the philosophical underpinning of the way I teach and why I teach that way. So one of the things that I tell kids on a regular basis when I start 9th grade with them, because I'm 9 through 12, vocal music, and they come into my class for the first time, and I make it very, very clear from the very beginning that this class is partially designed to put you in situations where you're going to be uncomfortable sometimes. And the reason for that is that singing around and in front of other people is very scary for most people. But once we figure out that you can overcome that, there is going to be very, very little that you can't overcome in addition to that. And I have a whole spiel that I take the kids through at the beginning of the year about how, we're not going to try to avoid you ever feeling uncomfortable. Sometimes we're going to design activities because they make you uncomfortable. And that's actually one of the skills that are going to carry into the rest of your life. So that's kind of my take on it. Now I want you to expand, if you're willing, about just kind of why you made that video and what it, what is it that you're hoping that music educators will understand about those concepts.
So the second chapter of the book, my book, I get into the traits that are built in human beings when they learn music in an emotionally intelligent way. Bravery was one of the first ones. So if you comb through the literature of music psychology and you synthesize what it is that they say goes on in the brain, like we're talking about those neural pathways for bravery, those neural pathways for doing something while being active while you are afraid, because generally fear shuts you down. But when you're doing music, you are afraid, but you can continue acting. That's bravery. And that attaches to just about everything a human is required to do. I find it very interesting that people with a good amount of wealth know this. They are well aware that music is important because it's music. Sure. Music is important because it raises test scores. Sure. But really what they are wanting to get out of music is kids who aren't afraid to rule a boardroom. I am confident enough in myself, which you get in music too. You get this confidence of I can go places I wouldn't expect to go, with humility, where it's like I can go where I need to go, and if I mess up, it's okay. That's the second trait that really pops out if you're learning music. People who are really wealthy put their kids in schools, and those schools that cater to the very wealthy, they are doing music for hours a day. Every kid, every day, for an hour or 2. I'm thinking about this school in Chicago that I went and visited where it's $75,000 a year to send your kid to this school, pre-K through 12. And they have a squadron of music teachers because they know this piece. They know that when you build that bravery skill, it will go everywhere, and that it's the most efficient place to be learned is in a music classroom. They don't cut music. When people who are understanding enough to have a lot of money, when they design education, they put music at the center of it.
Right. And if they don't have it in their private fancy school, then they're putting their kids in private lessons and all of those things from a young age. And it's obviously the financial investment there is less of a lift for them, but that's going to be that's a super common thing. I know here in Kansas City where I live, our public school music programs are actually the bigger, more robust ones in comparison to the private school programs. However, I also know, and my brother kind of lives in the area where most of the kids go to the private schools, those kids are all in private music instruction because the school doesn't have as much. So they'll just shell out extra money on top of the tuition to get the private instruction. So I think you're right. This is a really interesting critique, and I don't think I've ever heard anyone quite raise it the way you just did, which is to just point out that the privileged aren't the ones who get their music cut, regardless. Like when the school, even probably in Oregon where you are, if the places that cut the music teachers, the people with the means to continue their kids' music education will choose to do that. And so then who gets ruled out are all the kids that don't, all the families that don't. They need that's music instruction to happen at school, or else it's never going to happen. Thoughts?
Right. Well, my biggest thought is twofold. The first is that I have on my website, I have all these free posters, and I put one on there, even though it's kind of a hot button topic of equity, because you mentioned inequity, and really music access is equity. Because what you're saying is that there's this incredible thing that can build a brain, this remarkably efficient thing that can build a brain, and we are taking access away from people who wouldn't have the money to go get it elsewhere. So the first piece is equity. Music access is equity. The second one is that the other reason that these super wealthy people make sure the schools that their kids go to have music, or make sure, usually both and, that their kids have music in school and they're doing some sort of private instruction, is because of what you said about it being anti-AI. They know, they see that the most valuable skills are going to be the ones that are developed off of an AI platform. And so they want their kids to have as much music, as much philosophy. They actually, they keep up with the math and everything that the rest of people usually are able to maintain. They keep up with that, but they put them in places where they have to use their brain, and they see that the most efficient place to do that is music.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of research, and if you know the specific, this one thing I talked about with Anita Collins when she was on, but there aren't very many better workouts for the brain than music, reading while performing and singing and playing something and doing, because that's that triangle she was talking about. So if I have to use my ear to listen and respond, I also have to see something that I'm seeing and responding to. I'm decoding, but I'm also feeling the emotional centers of my brain working, and I'm also feeling the kinesthetic motion of having to play or sing or operate muscle groups and if I'm having to do all of those things all at the same time, it's one of my things that I say a lot on the internet, and it's amazing how much it makes people mad sometimes, but it is my belief that if parents, by and large, knew the fireworks display that is going off in their kids' brains when they're doing all of that at the same time, they would require that their kids were in music. They wouldn't just hope that their kid would choose it. They would assign it like homework.
So I think a huge piece of this, and I'm going to go on my own little soapbox here. I think a huge piece of this is that there is this idea that if you invest time in something, it had better be something you can make money doing. I think that's just a cultural value. Idea. It's a cultural value that if you invest time in something, you should be able to make a paycheck from it. And then they look at the world and they go, well, my kid's not going to become a professional musician. That's true. But it's almost like, it's like planting a seed. But then they don't apply that to
sports.
I know. Well, so many of them.
Or dance.
I've heard. Right. Well, but they see it, they really do need to see, like you said, that firework going on in the brain, because they're like, oh, well, dance, sports, that's keeping their body healthy. But you look at like end of life stuff, there are so few musicians who end up with dementia. And even people who have dementia, when they listen to music, all of a sudden their brain almost reforms, and you get people talking when they're listening to music they listened to before. It's like, great, I want your kid to have a healthy body too. But do you want your kid to have dementia? Because, like, not obviously you wouldn't say it like that, but like, do you want to prevent your child from having to deal with brain decline? Then you need to give them an instrument that they can play for the rest of their life.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I agree with you. I think we're kind of preaching to the choir here, though. I will say that most people, at least in my experience, don't visualize the brain as something that can build in the same way that muscles can. In other words, we can, like when I go to the gym with my son and try to convince him he needs to work out and get stronger, he can see that my muscles are bigger than his, and he can see that as he's working harder and working longer, that his muscles start to slightly grow, and that seeing the growth visually actually is a motivator for him to continue. But with the brain functions in a very similar way. This whole creating a neural pathway is a physical thing. Like the neurons actually physically grow, and the brain can become more dense in its pathways. Just the problem is we can't see it, and so we don't visualize it in the same way. It's easier to convince people that their muscles growing is a good thing, but then we say, yeah, you know what, your brain does that too. But I just don't think most people think of it that way.
So Harvard just did this big longitudinal study on what successful people have in common. So successful people being people who they're not gauging it entirely by money, but it's more like you have money enough that you are comfortable, you're living, you have successful relationships with your partner, with your spouse, with your community. These are successful people. People who make a positive impact in their communities, in their jobs. Generally people that you would go, that person, maybe doesn't have it all together, but they are healthy and whole human beings. The number one indicator was emotional intelligence, being able to control and modulate your own emotions and interface with other people's emotions with extreme skill.
Yeah.
Being able to modulate your own emotions is something you learn when you are learning an instrument. Because music exists in that emotional centers of your brain, when you are having a big emotion and you have that tool, then you are practicing emotional regulation. So those neural pathways that you're talking about, there are neural pathways for emotional regulation that have to be built, and you have to be skillful at using them. You're learning that in a music classroom. So it's almost as if you put your kid in a music classroom. If the only thing you got out of it is they learned how to emotionally regulate, you put them in a classroom to give them the one skill that every successful human has.
Right. Yeah, I love how you said that, especially just kind of by pointing out to students and parents that when they engage in music instruction, kind of framing it in that way of, even if you only learn one thing, even if you don't even become a super good piano player, even if you don't ever become a super good singer, if you pull one thing out of it, it's that you've learned that you can do something that's really hard, even when you told yourself that you couldn't do it. Like, can you just pull that little nugget out of your 1 year in my class, in my case? That's one of the things that I would tell kids, because one of the controversial teaching practices that I believe very strongly in is I do require my students to sing by themselves. It's awesome. Not an option. Now, I don't make them get up in front of whole groups of people to do it. They can. It's individualized instruction that happens throughout the school year, and they get private locations to do that, and some kids can opt into more exposure, that kind of thing. But one of the things that happens, because they have their first sing by themselves moment, usually in October at the beginning of my school year, and kids sometimes cry. They have a trauma response in that very first, because somebody is now listening to me. But what happens in every single case, and I've been doing this for 15 years this way, is that kid that cries, in almost all cases, will stay in my class for 4 years. And then when they're doing that same test as a senior in high school, I will bring it up. I'll say, do you remember when you did this the first time in 9th grade and you just cried the whole time? And usually they don't even remember. They don't even remember that they cried, and they laugh because they no longer can even picture themselves as being that scared to sing, because they've gotten so much more confident. And I think that's a really powerful illustration of what it is that you're talking about here, because that student built neural pathways of bravery.
Bravery. They gained emotional resilience. And just think, though, if that student had not been in your class and you had not put them into that experience, they would be holding some form of fear around their voice that will apply to any other place that they need to use their voice. And think of all the other places that they need to be able to express themselves. And see, that's just gone. It's music instruction done in a way like what you are saying, where the music teacher is very aware of what philosophically they are trying to get out of their work, ends up as a pseudotherapy itself. And this has been true, by the way, for all of human history and prehistory. We have used music like this. So it's not new, but I think a bunch of us are rediscovering, like, oh, when you are doing music this way, it is a therapy all by itself. all on its own.
Mm-hmm. It's a therapy. It's a brain workout. It's a philosophical exercise. Of course, the ancient Greeks viewed it as a core part of education. Music was a core pillar of education for a reason, and I think part of what I wish we would be rediscovering is that it's like, what does it mean to have music as a core subject rather than a special, which drives me crazy. I'm one of the specials teachers. Like, in what way is it special? It's primary. It's core to who we are. We are a musical species. I would even say just the fact that we're one of only 2 or 3 species of animals on the planet that learns by mimicking sound. Like, we are a musical species, and to have it be something that we're even having to make podcasts and argue about having in schools and supported by parents is wild to me.
Yeah. It's the advocacy piece is really interesting. And I really am glad that there are podcasts like this where we are having the conversation, because so many of the advocacy things that we talk about are pretty tired. They help math scores, which, by the way, from a neurological point of view, is absolutely true and is underappreciated by a significant amount, especially if you are doing music reading. But even without the music reading side, it's still going to help that. But yeah, music is important because it helps math scores. Music is important because it is music. I think those arguments are tired. People are not interested in them. I think the bigger thing is really getting at who you're talking to. What you were saying about, is there music trauma? Is there music indifference? Because I know very few people that when they see their students having an amazing experience in their music program, when people see their kids in that space, they will bend over backwards to keep it. They will do whatever it takes to make sure that those kids have what they need.
Absolutely.
That's advocacy all by itself. If you can convince parents, and you can, like, look at what this is doing for your kid, you don't really have to worry about a job again.
Right. No, I 100% agree. That's a really good point. Let's wrap up this way. Well, why don't you tell us more about your book? This is your chance to brag. Why should people buy it? What's in it? What are they going to get out of it? All those types of things. So what's inside the cover once you crack it open?
So it's too long, and the reason it's too long is because it's really 3 books, unfortunately. So I have this. I'll actually show it to you. This is a first edition copy. It's called Making Musicians, and
Making Musicians, and it's got a picture of a brain on the front. I love it.
It's got a big picture of the brain. Too. What's that?
I said I love it, and Anita would love it too.
Yeah, we're going to be talking pretty soon, Anita and I. We're going to be doing some collaborative stuff. So the first bit is an anthropological view of music, like just breaking down, because so many people, when they think of music, they think of classical music done by people who have spent their whole life becoming really, really good. So we break that all down and say, you are a musician if you are a human being without amusia. Amusia is a very particular diagnosis. It's not like, oh, I'm tone deaf, but it actually is like, I do not understand tones that occur. So they don't even understand huge parts of languages, and usually they can't recognize faces when they have amusia. So whenever somebody's like, oh, well, I'm tone deaf, I can't do music. And I'm like, do you recognize my face? Okay, you're a musician. Because if you were really, truly a music, then that would be the case. So we go through the anthropological purpose of music. We go through the 9 traits that you get out of becoming a trained musician. The middle section is music in the brain for busy music teachers, because I didn't want to get into like, this structure does this and this structure does that. It's not like that. It's like, if you're looking at a kid right in front of you, you've got 3 parts of the brain to think about. Very redolent of what Dr. Collins talks about, but in a different visualization. Actually visualize it as a car, like a Porsche 911 or a VW Bug, where the engine is in the back, automatic movement.
Yep.
The trunk is in the front, the thinking bit. How does that work? And then the emotions are in the middle, where the driver is, because the emotions are the driver of your brain. It determines where you're going to go and whether you're going to pack and whether you're going to rev. So we set that analogy in the middle of the book. And at the end of the book, we talk about, at every learning stage, what are the emotions that come up, so that you can help the driver of your student's brain feel really confident about what they are doing, about being able to move forward with whatever it is that they're going to do. So the book is on giamusic.com. It's on Amazon. It's on lots of different places. You can find out more about us and what we're doing. We've got a whole training we're going to be promoting here at the end of July and in August to get a certification for emotionally intelligent music instruction. And I'm teaching a class at Vandercook this fall. So Yeah.
That's awesome. So the book is on GIA.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I wish I had known that. And it probably is not too. So I have a GIA Walton series here on the show.
Oh, do you?
And so, yeah, so I will reach out to them before I publish this and see if they can hop on and help me promote the episode.
Okay.
But we just have an agreement. I just didn't realize the show was, or the book was on that publisher. That
Yeah.
might be a cool opportunity to help spread the word a little bit more. So
Cool.
how about social media? How can we find you online and see more of your little wise blurbs?
So I'm on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. I'm still building up the YouTube side of things. So we had to do a little bit of a switch. But if you look up Making Musicians, you're probably going to find me. Yeah, Allison Wilkinson, Making Musicians. Yep, you'll find me.
Awesome. And I highly recommend it. I've really enjoyed watching your videos. And of course, getting a chance to speak with you more in depth here has been a lot of fun. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, this has been a blast. Thank you so much for having me on, Chris.
Of course. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of a conversation. If you are still hearing my voice, that means you're one of the MVPs, one of the diehards, one of the real ones, as the kids say. So if you are willing on the way out to check out a few different ways that you can help me continue to make this show high quality. One, use the promo code. That's the biggest one at Sight Reading Factory, at mymusicfolders.com, at mychoirropes.com, at graphitepublishing.com, and endeavormusicpublishing.com. All of those take the Choralosophy checkout code. And of course, now the newest one is 3-Minute Theory. You can get a 15% discount when you enter Choralosophy at checkout there. And of course, going to Apple Podcasts and leaving a positive review is very helpful there, and sharing the episodes to your colleagues in real life and on social media. All of those things are incredibly helpful and allow me to continue to create this resource for you. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.